All right, as we come into focus, this is my YouTube channel, kind of weekly show. This is not a snow day. Started off with targeting parents who are educating their kids during the quarantine, and has now become a conversation about the world outside of the quarantine, inside the quarantine, and where our worlds kind of meet, especially the topics of the day. As I was reflecting with recent events around race and voice and equality, I realized that I was not having enough different perspectives. So in my attempts to amplify and echo, I've invited on a really well-respected educator, a good friend, and a heck of a basketball player. All of this is true. But instead of those are just the broad strokes. Mitch Novus, thank you for being here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, Kevin. I appreciate it. And I'm a longtime listener, first time caller. I've been digging your show.
Thank you.
We go back. So I saw on the various social media feeds back in week one. So I've really appreciated this venture of yours. I think it's welcome and needed and very cool. And you've got a great T-shirt collection. I'm sure the regular viewers have noticed by now. It's incredible.
I need to shut down the show because I'm almost out. I Jurassic 5 concert shirt from about 2004, which is a gem, but we're digging into the crates a little bit.
I noticed it was J5, and another time we're gonna have to talk about that because that's one of my great lost white whales. I never saw them. I have yet to see TV on the radio, so I'm always hoping that they come back. Not that we can see anybody right now, but
it's good to have goals. It's good to have goals.
Someday. So who am I? That's a good question. For when I'm a teacher, and in one of our staff meetings on Zoom, I've set up in lots of places in my house because I'm a parent, and that's what we'll get into here in a little bit. So I have Zoomed in 20 different locations, and one time it was in front of my drums, and these are people I work with. So you never talk about your entire life with people. Oh yeah, I could probably go on and on and on trying to introduce myself to somebody. So I'm a former drummer. I am Mitch Novus. I'm a teacher, 20-something years. Most of that was high school English, so reading and writing, particularly writing. I'm a co-director of a Red Cedar Writing Project. It's a site of the National Writing Project, which is a teacher professional learning community organization for teachers of writing. So I'm also a writer. I write a lot. I've written co-written a book for teachers of writing. I've written a handful of teacher essays, pedagogy stuff. But then in recent years, I've really been focusing a lot more on my creative work. I think probably 85% of high school English teachers, I've got a couple of paused/dead novels out there someplace on hard drives. But really lately, it's been poetry. I've been working a lot on writing poems and getting them polished up and out into the world. Other stuff. So I'm in Metro Detroit by way of marriage. I'm originally a farmer from mid-Michigan. Well, son of farmer from mid-Michigan. I don't know. I could go on and on. Like I was saying, the things you never think to introduce yourself with to somebody. Yeah. It's the main things, though. Yeah. Last couple of years, I've been doing some other stuff in the educational world, still in teaching, but I've been in an elementary setting for a couple of years, doing some restorative practice stuff. So that's been really cool. So yeah, you name it. I'm sort of a utility infielder at this point, I think.
You are. You're a four-tool player. You will get very high. That's exactly what the world's looking for.
Triple double, baby.
One of the things that I think gives you a ton of perspective is the fact that you've seen the world in a lot of different ways. And as a parent of two black boys, you have you see the world through a couple different lenses. And you shared a little bit as we were prepping something that someone said to you that I think is fascinating. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about the assumption people made with the of course as they kind of thought they understood where you were coming from. Could you share a little bit about that? Because I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I kind of bypassed that. I said I'm a parent, but my wife and I are adoptive parents. We have adopted two boys. And they're both young black boys, African American. And a common question, this week in the middle of the protests, and Angela Davis herself said she's never seen this before. So I'm very hopeful that we're not just in the middle of another round of protests, but that like things are changing. NASCAR just banned the Confederate flag. Like I got a chill when I saw that. I'm like, that's not, I combed it for the Onion. I combed the headline.
For sure.
This is real. Like, this is very cool. So, so I get asked a lot. I've done a lot of work in restorative practice in the workplace and things like that. And a lot of things that end up coming back around to equity, and particularly issues of racial equity in America, and all the dances we do around just saying being anti-racist. So a lot of my work is working toward being anti-racist. And you'll notice I caught my phrasing there because I'm a white boy, and you can't just be anti-racist in a system that is deeply and pretty much every possible permutation a racist structure. And everybody's thinking right now, shutting us off, like, no, you didn't mean to make it a racist structure. It's been that way for hundreds of years. We were all just born into it. Right. So a lot of folks see me as a middle-aged white man with black boys and think like, well, that's why you're for, Black Lives Matter. That's why you think that. And I always kind of try to politely hit pause and rewind on that with folks for a second to think like, do you think that I support equity and Black lives because my boys are Black, or do you think that my wife and I were open to adopting children of another race because we were already open-minded and had already done a lot of deep digging into our own experiences and preconceived biases and you name it, like to be an adoptive parent in a transracial family and to do it well, which God knows I'm probably not, but I'm trying, to do it well would mean that you've already done a ton of that work, so like Ibram X. Kendi is all the rage right now, which is great. Again, sends chills down my spine when his book sells out. Like that's great news for America. So to be a successful white parent of Black children, like you should be reading stuff like Ibram X. Kendi, Ta-Nehisi Coates. And we had already done that work. Not all of it. Again, I want to really reiterate, I'll probably say this 1,000 times, so feel free to digitally slap me if I do it too many times, but like it's never a finished product.
Right.
Especially for white people, but also for Black folks. Like America is structurally racist. So it's a continuous project for all of us. But one thing I think is really cool, and then I'll shut up because I feel like I'm going off on a tangent.
No, I didn't invite you to show to listen to me, man. You that's okay. I could have just called. I want you to do it.
So I'm just gonna hang up and listen. The part of growing up on a farm means you spend a lot of time in a tractor, which means I've listened to a lot of talk radio in my formative years. So that long-time listener, first-time caller thing, like that's ingrained. I haven't listened to talk radio in ages, but that's in there. No, what I was going to say is the cool thing about like working toward anti-racism being a process that one never masters is that so we have this really kind of mixed history in America of a lot of it's really horrific and some of it's pretty cool. But the whole notion of America is to, I think, always be growing and being better. Like there is no perfection of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness because happiness is kind of undefinable. So there isn't like a rubric. It's like check, achieved pursuit of happiness. So we're always in development. And so as horrific as our racist history is, we're also set up to always be getting better. And that's where I get frustrated with our country is when folks don't do that, when folks don't work to get better. And I really, really wish that folks were a little bit more attuned to that notion. I mean, our very founding documents could be guiding us through a lot of this.
For sure. I want to hit on a couple of things you said. One is, whenever I have the honor to teach American history, it's life. Like you have a right to that, and that's what we're actually having a conversation right now. You have life, liberty, the options, and the pursuit of happiness. That it's not the happiness that I think is the focus there. It's always the pursuit, and pursuit is ongoing. It is not to catch happiness. So you talked that you had done some of that work, and one of the conundrums for people who are trying to be more woke or to start this journey is we have heard loud and clear, don't put the responsibility of your learning on your black friends.
Right.
And so I think there's a lot of people who are like, I really want to learn. I get it. Now I'm mad. I had no idea. Who do I ask? So you grew up on a giant dairy farm in central northern Michigan. You know, you had a brother, you were in a rock band, you're now a middle-aged white man. What happened? Like, what were some things that triggered for you, or experiences you had, or things that you saw that had enough impact that you are here now, in the place that you and your wife were comfortable with the responsibility of trying to raise two black boys? So what were some of the things? Or, I mean, was there a moment, did someone say something at a party? Was it a Black Flag record? Like, what happened?
The last one actually is kind of close. So this is something I've spent my adulthood like parsing out, right? Like trying to figure this out. Which leads me to step one is just a state of mind, just to be reflective in the first place. It's the whole, now in teaching, we call it growth mindset, right? But when I was 17, I had no idea what the heck growth mindset was. And nor did I know what it meant to be reflective, but I was. It turns out I was. And that's kind of the first trick, is not just think, you mentioned Black Flag, so think music, right? Or TV or movies. Like, I just wasn't one of those kids who just turned it on, laughed, and then went and did something else. Like, it sank in. You know, like I thought about the stuff afterwards. Like, you know, there's like the person who walks out of the movie theater and is like, all right, well, let's go get a drink. And then this person who walks out of the movie theater and says like, did you notice like that thing? So I was always like person B in that scenario. And I think that if you're going to boil it down to one thing, that's it. It's just be reflective. Like, think about things, you know, because if you do that, you're going to start to notice all the wrinkles in the societal pattern that don't quite fit, and they'll jump out to you. Another part, of course, is good parents. You know, my parents are good people, and, you know, didn't run around being racist. You know, I mean, and we're talking mid-Michigan in, you know, the 70s and 80s. So, like, you want to talk structural racism, like, it was a racist place, but, like, you know, my parents were open-minded. My mom's from Detroit. My dad played football at Western Michigan University and was in the Army. So, like, you know, they were exposed to people of different backgrounds, and that is huge, right? Like, if you know people, you start to understand different perspectives and different experiences, right? And then the kind of the last one, and I had a big brother, which helps, right? So you, like, the music, like, we joke, but, like, we were into Public Enemy in Clinton County, Michigan, as It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back came out. Like, we had it when it was new, you know? So, like, there's something to be said. This one didn't really sink into me for years. And then my older brother, Kerry, one time said, like, you know, the fact that MTV exists is going to help the next generation, because people are seeing different cultures. Like, if you just grew up in St. John's and didn't see any of that, like, you wouldn't know, right? You know? And so, but that doesn't, as we've seen a million times, like, just, was it today or yesterday, there's the big, people are freaking out because Rage Against the Machine has political lyrics. So there's obviously guys who don't actually do the reflecting part. So, like, I listened to I wore out a tape cassette of Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back, but I thought about what Chuck D was saying.
Yeah.
You know? I saw Do the Right Thing, and I thought about what Spike Lee was saying.
Yesterday was exactly on the art of reflection, and I think a couple points you just laid out are things that parents can do at home and teachers can do at home, which is have the why conversation, and start it with even the children's books you're reading. Why did the bear act like that? Why was the mouse so grumpy? You know, and you begin having those conversations, so you prime it. As parents, introducing your kids to lots of different people, and if you're scrolling through your feed and everybody looks the same, then you might need to make some new friends. And you might need to expand your network a little bit. The idea of travel, the idea of seeing parts of the world, different media. You mentioned Public Enemy. I remember my father asking me about It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back, my cassette tape. And he just wanted to know what it was. And we were looking at it. And on the album art of the cassette that I had, they were standing on the American flag in a jail cell. Version of it. And I remember youngly, that's a thing. My dad said, well, so why would they do that? And yes, and the Rage Against the Machine, Tom Morello, I think yesterday, just replied. He's like, he's like, thanks for pointing out that we're political. I'm going to go ahead and erase our entire catalog now.
Yeah.
Which we laugh at, but there are people who today on social media were recognizing Christopher Columbus might not be the kind of guy we should have on statues. And if we're just coming to these realizations, and I think it's easy to get frustrated. However, it's much better to say, okay, so now we know. And Maya Angelou, now that we know better, we can do better.
Yeah. So
those are all, that's great, because those are things that people can do, but they have to actively do it, right? You have to choose to reflect. I was really interested in some people who are saying that would we have noticed all this if, so I guess there's a question coming here. We've got no sports. We're locked in our houses. We can't go out to eat. We have attention capital, right? We've got we've got all this bandwidth. Do you think that we would have gotten to this place anyway, or do you think it was was it coming? Did we need to be able to? Did we need the focus? That's something I'm thinking about, because this moment now, you kind of walk two worlds, and I think you're being a little modest and downplaying. But we've talked about you trying to be a parent. You're definitely trying to honor and learn about the culture of your sons, who also share culture with you because they're your family. So from your perspective, did you see this coming, or do you think it's...
Not this way, no. I mean, what kind of a doofus would I be if I said, well, yes, I saw this coming? Well, Angela Davis just said she didn't. I'm not as smart as Angela Davis.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised that we're finally seeing some forward progress, because I think there have been signals of that. Not to get too political, but I mean, the election of somebody who is very openly more supportive of some groups than others, as opposed to fighting for an American equality dream. The very election of a person like that is a death rattle of sorts.
Yeah,
it is. It's a classic 2 steps forward, 1 step back. The Ta-Nehisi Coates essay, again, just read smarter people than me. Like Ta-Nehisi Coates' essay, how does he phrase it? The first white president. Like, we had 44 white presidents just because everybody in control was white. Right. But then we had a black president. So who you elect next is the first time that people consciously said, no, we want the white guy again.
I'll that wonderful essay by Ta-Nehisi Coates in the about here. All these things I'll put so people can check them out. So there was movement. You definitely perceived it as some movement, and now there's nature abhors a vacuum. We're constantly in a dynamic. So,
well, I think we went from something that was going to take 25 years at best to something that might be happening like much faster. We'll see how long it takes, but I mean, the whole NASCAR Confederate flag thing, that was 10 years away without this last month alone, right? So I think, back to your original question, that's a confluence of events that I don't mean this part as a value judgment. I'm not saying good or bad, but I think one natural outcome of capitalism and low wages is that people have to constantly be working no matter what's going on in the world. And the second something happens that says, actually, you can't go to work right now.
Yeah.
Now people have the capital of time on their hands. And, it's not like people all of a sudden got smart. There've been a lot of really smart people that couldn't do anything with that awareness because they had to go work 3 jobs, and for the last couple of months, that couldn't happen really for most people. And so a lot of this is just, it's a confluence of timing. It's like the people have been, woke. The people have wanted change. And now yet another round of assaults, of murders, and folks have time to go protest it. It's not that people didn't care about, pick one, Eric Garner. People cared about Eric Garner, but they had to go to work. Like, you had to feed your kids. And right now, for better or for worse, people can't go to work, so you can feel the nature abhors a vacuum. People have the time to make their voices heard. The voices have been there. They just didn't necessarily have a way to get heard. Look at when you watch the protest footage, how many of these are like college kids who
Yeah.
would take final exams before, and now they can go.
Yeah, totally. So I know you are paused for bedtime. We're recording this at evening time, and we could have a sighting of any of your young friends.
If you hear screaming, that's what's going on.
So ask you this question, and you can answer it in any of the roles that you live in every day. What are some things that you and your family are going to do differently or new or continue to do as we're in this period? As an educator, as a writer, as a parent, like what do you see this impacting your everyday? Are there different kinds of conversations happening in your house? Are you planning classes differently? I'm just curious how, as a person in the world, what effect do you think this is going to have on you as you continue in your roles?
There's so many ways I could answer that. Something you said just makes me think. The first thing I want to say is that I've gotten pretty good at just rolling with the punches in the last few years, especially. So part of me is just thinking, well, we just relaxed all of the at-home stuff, and folks are going out. I'm the only guy in my neighborhood wearing a mask when I go out. Like our family, all four of us will wear a mask, and like we don't see other masks. So I'm not really planning ahead because I'm guessing we'll all be back at home pretty soon. Like once the next round of spike, it's a highly contagious virus, and folks are not taking preventative care. So the odds of us all being back at home pretty soon are pretty good. So I'm just kind of waiting. I'm in a wait and see pattern as far as that goes. Back to the bigger question of like what's going to change for us. A lot, because this confluence of events has kind of forced our hand in some ways. We hadn't really had the police talk with our young black men in our household before, and now we've had to. Our kids, and I should probably add a little context. Our kids are 10 and 6. Like the 10-year-old we've started to have. He's probably the wokest member of our house. Like for library time at school, he goes looking for the Harriet Tubman book, like voluntarily on his own. He was like 4, and we like exhausted the Abraham Lincoln section at the library. Like he'll probably be a history teacher someday, and he very quickly picked up on the inequities in American history. But the 6-year-old is, I'm quite serious in that I'm not sure what he'll be someday, but he might be the first legitimately funny professional basketball player on Saturday Night Live. Like that's kind of his combination of skill sets. So for him, like the heavy lifting concepts, like he does not want to hear that you might not be able to trust random people on the street. Like that doesn't jive with his outlook. But he's also a 6-year-old, the size of a 3rd grader. Like he's going to be a humongous black man.
Yeah.
So, you don't have a choice, boss. Like you have to be aware of this. And so that brings about this whole weird intersection that we knew was coming, but you've got 2 white parents teaching 2 black boys about the realities of 21st century America and 20th century America and 19th century America and so on and so on and so on. And so that is one immediate thing that is different in our lives, is that we have had some very serious conversations that we probably would have taken some more time to plan. But at the same time, like this is teaching 101, right? Like you can spend a month planning your lesson, and then once the class walks in, that lesson's going to go someplace different and probably better anyways. So I also am thrilled that current events led us to have this conversation before we necessarily would have. Do I think 6 is developmentally too young to be aware that people of authority sometimes use that authority to take life? Yeah, I think that's developmentally too young. But we also subscribe to a newspaper, and there are pictures sitting on the table that need some explaining, need some context. So, it's life. Life gives you the parenting you have to do,
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing part of your parenting journey with us. I think there's a lot of people who are, in a great way, experiencing a lot of dissonance and a lot of uncomfortability, and sometimes just hearing somebody else's journey that parallels theirs or shares some characteristics is really, really helpful. So thank you very much for that, Mitch. Any final thoughts? Anything else you want to put out into the interwebs before I let you enjoy your evening?
I mean, since we've ended up talking a lot about like race and equity issues, and we're two white men, right? I just want to.
Yeah,
I'm gonna say any like big like piece of advice from Mitch. It's just that like I get it when white people resist this. It's the whole fish describing water scenario, right? Like a fish can't describe water; it's the air it breathes. So just listen. If you're white in America, listen. For me, I grew up surrounded by cows, so there wasn't anybody to listen to except for Public Enemy, Chuck D, Spike Lee, stuff like that. So I say that kind of like with a laugh, but for real, like read. I actually, got the Fight Evil Read Books shirt on right now. Like it doesn't have to start with the scary conversations you're not ready to have. You can converse with your own brain. Like you can converse with the book, with an essay, with poetry. Pick up Langston Hughes. If you're not comfortable with new stuff, get a classic. Like these aren't new ideas. James Baldwin's work's been out there. Langston Hughes' work has been out there. Zora Neale Hurston has been out there. Like grab a book and just read it, but pause and think sometimes, because that's really where that magic's going to happen. And I do get frustrated. I mean, we say a lot like, well, white people, you've got to listen to your black friends. And if you don't have black friends, that speaks volumes. But part of America's structural racism is that we had redlining and we are separated in our neighborhoods. And you may not literally have any black friends. And that may not actually be your fault because of structural components in the way our whole society is built. You might be very open-minded to talking to people of different backgrounds and not know any because of the kind of job you have in the part of the country you live in, the part of the state you live in. Like I'm right away from one of America's greatest black-white divides. Like it's not anymore, but Livonia used to be the whitest per percentage city in America. And Detroit was the blackest by percentage city in America. And they're neighbors, right? It's right over there.
But that's Dearborn. That was a fascinating little part of geography. To listen, read, to reflect, and to try and have those conversations, even if it's just with yourself.
Create those conversations. You may not have a neighbor you can talk to, and it wouldn't be their job to educate you anyways if you did. So converse with your own brain by getting some good books. Listen to audiobooks, podcasts. There's a lot of good stuff out there that'll help you start the journey.
Perfect. Well, Mitch, thanks so much for sharing your journey and helping us start and continue ours. I won't wish you luck with anything because it never helps, but summer vacation's almost here. That's as a teacher at home and a teacher in the world. And your wife's an educator as well.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. You guys have earned hopefully a peaceful June and July.
We're about to pivot from homeschool to home basketball camp. That's what's going to happen.
That sounds awesome. Mitch, I'm going to put your social media name in the about here. So we'll check out some of the authors you just mentioned. As we want to reach out to Mitch or know more about his story, you can hit him up on social media. As always, thanks for spending 28 minutes with us here, just talking about the big important stuff. Comment, like, and if Mitch said something that you think, oh my gosh, you know who needs to hear this, send them this video. Don't be shy. Maybe the first step is copying this URL and dropping it in your social media or sending it to that aunt and uncle and say, hey, I want to talk to you about this, or what do you think? I really liked what he said, because we can all help start these conversations within our own circles. So it gets easier to have them in the bigger world. So Mitch, thanks again. Have a great night and enjoy your summer.
Hey, you too, buddy. Thanks for having me.
You're very, very welcome. And now the awkward stopping of recording.